Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Crime and Punishment story. This week I am covering the very strange case of Ralph Joicey and the murder of Robert Joicey, which took place in Cockle Park in 1845. Cockle Park is an area around 3 miles outside of Morpeth, and sadly I have not been able to find any location photos, so for the purposes of this video, the photos will mostly be of Morpeth itself. I hope you will find the story interesting. Sadly, due to the age of this story, the past lives of those involved was impossible to find, so their backstory is even less than basic. So I will simply add the entire family together as one, as there is so little to tell. Robert Joicey lived with his wife, who was not named, and his daughter Margaret and son Ralph at Cockle Park near Morpeth. Robert was described by those he lived with as a man who was not very nice. It seems the family did not like him very much, and they all seemed to argue on a regular basis, although it does appear that the main arguments took place between husband and wife. Robert was said to be around 67 years old in 1845, and his son Ralph was said to be around 24 years old. Both Robert and Ralph worked on the farm where they lived. No mention is given in any of those in this week's case being people who were fond of drinking. Before we go any further, can I just say, if you do find this video interesting, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you are new here or haven't already done so, then do please consider subscribing to the channel to help support the content we create. It really is very much appreciated. And it is completely free to subscribe. It doesn't cost you any money, but it really does help to support the channel. And I would just like to add, as I always do, that I do record these stories live, so I do sometimes make mistakes, which I always try to rectify. So I hope this does not spoil your enjoyment of the video. The Joicey family were in the habit of having medicine left for them at their local public house. Both Robert and his wife had been ill during the year of 1845, and both had collected medication left for them by Dr. Headley at the pub. In November of 1845, a packet was brought to their house by one of the neighbours, and they were told it had been left for Robert by the doctor. Inside the packet were 2 powders, and Robert took one of them on December the 1st, and he immediately became very ill. Robert was ill for several days, with none of his family making any effort to send for a doctor. Finally, one of the other men working on the farm notified Dr. Headley that Robert was seriously ill, and he came to see him. Dr. Headley said he had not left any medicine for the family at the pub, and he believed that Robert was suffering from some kind of poisoning. Robert died the following day, and after suspicion was aroused, the police arrested Ralph Joicey on a charge of causing the death of his father. And it was also at first believed that both Robert's wife and daughter had been involved in his death, and they too were arrested on the same charge as Ralph. The inquest was held at Morpeth Courthouse at the end of December before Coroner Russell. It was not stated who had identified the body of Robert Joicey, but as he did have 2 other sons living away from home, it is likely that they would have identified him. Anne Richardson said she worked for Robert Joicey. She said she had heard his daughter say that she would poison him. She said Robert was often arguing with his family. She said he felt that they ate too much food. Sarah Thompson said she lived with her husband near to Cockle Park in Morpeth and knew the Joicey family. She said on December the 2nd she was told that Robert was unwell. She said she went to see him the following day and found him in bed. His wife and daughter were also in the room. Sarah said she asked Robert how he was, and he told her he was very unwell. He had a pain in his chest and felt as if he was being choked. She said he had hiccups and told her he was constantly thirsty. Sarah said she told Mrs. Joicey that she should send for a doctor. She said she replied saying that they did have a doctor. Sarah said she knew this, but Dr. Headley had not visited Robert since he had taken ill. She said Mrs. Joicey said she was afraid to send for him. She said she left after this and did not return until the 6th, when Hannah Brown called on her to go to the house. Sarah said this time she found Robert had been out of bed and his family were trying to assist him to get back to bed. He seemed to have fainted. She said the doctor had still not been sent for. Sarah said she did not stop, but was called back again the following morning, again by Hannah Brown, and this was once more to help Robert get back into bed. She said while she was there, Edward Brown came in and asked Robert how he was. He replied, saying that he had been ill now for 5 days and nights, and not one of his family had asked him how he was. She said his wife and daughter were still in the room, and Mrs. Joicey did not look too happy about this remark, but she did not say anything. Sarah said she returned again that night with her husband, and he told Robert he must send for a doctor, and Mr. Dickinson went to fetch Dr. Headley. She said his wife and daughter made no encouragement towards sending for the doctor. The following morning, she said Mrs. Joicey knocked to tell her that the doctor had been. She said he had told her he knew nothing of the powders left at the pub. She said Mrs. Joicey told her she had burnt the powder her husband had not taken. Sarah ended by saying that she had not seen Margaret Joicey take any notice of her father until the Sunday and the Monday. She said his wife had taken care of him, and she had not seen Ralph in the house once during the time his father had been ill. Walter Whelans said he worked at the farm at Cockle Park. He said he had employed Robert and his family. He had seen him during his illness, and he too had suggested a doctor should be sent for. He said it was some days before Dr. Headley was called to the house. He said after Robert had died, Ralph had asked to see him. He said Ralph told him he wanted to confess. Walter said he asked him, confess to what? And Ralph had replied, confess to poisoning my father. No other person was involved. Walter said he told him he was sorry to hear this and asked why he had done it. However, Ralph did not say. He simply spoke of buying the arsenic and leaving the fake powders at the pub. He said he had given the powders to a woman to drop at the pub and to say they had come from the doctor. Walter said he also told him where to find the remaining arsenic hidden in a bush. Walter said Ralph told him he did not know his father would suffer so much, but by then it was too late. Walter said he told Ralph to leave as he would now have to tell the police what he had been told, and he said Ralph took some clothes and money and left the farm. Thomas Brown of Morpeth said he had been told by Mr. Whelans that some powder had been hidden in a hedge close to the Joicey's home, and he had gone to find it. He said he found a small parcel with the words poison written on the outside, exactly where he had been told it would be. He said on his return to the farm, Margaret had told him that Ralph had left a letter in the stable, which repeated what he had already told Mr. Whelans. He said Mrs. Joicey had said she was not sorry that her son would have to be punished, as he had done the deed, but this proved that neither she nor her daughter had done anything wrong. John Thompson said he also worked at Morpeth, and he had been in the stables at Cockle Park and found Ralph's coat. He knew that Thomas Brown and others were looking for something, so he said he had checked the pockets and found some paper which Ralph had written on. The statement on the paper was then read to the jury, and it said, Ralph Joicey is the man that did the deed and bought the arsenic at Crichton the chemist. There was no one else aware of it but myself. You can find the remains of the poison hidden in a bush near to Causey Park Road, wrapped in blue paper. The coroner at this point asked the prisoners if they had anything to say. Ralph and his sister said nothing. However, Mrs. Joicey said, well, the truth will have to come out. On the Sunday after the funeral, Ralph told me he was going to the police to confess to his crime. P.C. Wigham of Morpeth said he had been given a small parcel containing the remains of the poison. It had been found exactly where Ralph had said it would be. He said Ralph had left the area after the funeral and after his confession. However, P.C. Wigham said he was easily found at his brother's house in Newcastle. He was arrested and charged with causing the death of his father, and he simply replied with, I know all about it. P.C. Wigham said on the way to the police station, Ralph said he had confessed to Mr. Whelans, and he strangely added that he had had a dream where he knew he must confess, and then he would be forgiven if he did so. Unusually, I did not find any details of a post-mortem for Robert Joicey mentioned at the inquest. However, one did take place, and the cause of death was recorded as poisoning. The coroner then spoke to the jury, stating that as for the male prisoner, the evidence seemed clear. They would have no difficulty in reaching a verdict there. However, they must also decide if they felt the mother and daughter had been aware of what Ralph had done, or if they had no idea what had happened to Robert to make him so ill. The jury, who retired for 15 minutes, returned a verdict of guilty of wilful murder against Ralph Joicey, and he was committed for trial. As for Mrs. Joicey and her daughter Margaret, the jury said they did not feel there was any evidence against them. The coroner then stated that they would be brought before the magistrates at a later date and would no doubt be discharged. I did not find any evidence of a funeral for Robert Joicey. However, it is clear that a funeral did take place, as his wife mentioned it during the inquest in her brief statement. Whether or not this was a pauper's funeral or if the family had the money to pay for the burial remains unclear. I did not find any evidence of a headstone for Robert Joicey anywhere in the area. The trial took place in February of 1846 at Morpeth Courthouse before Mr. Justice Coleridge. Ralph Joicey pleaded not guilty to the charge of wilful murder, and on this occasion there was a lot of new evidence heard at the trial. Julia Coulson said she was the landlady of the Portland Arms public house. She said she knew the Joicey family quite well, and on November the 30th, 1845, a man came to the pub and gave her some powders. He said they were for Robert and had come from Dr. Headley. She said she did not pay close attention to the man and did not think anything of it, as they often had medicine left at the pub for people to collect. Julia said she gave the packet to John Mitchison to deliver. John Mitchison of Morpeth said he had been present in the public house when the packet had been left. He did not notice the man who left it. He said Julia gave him the packet and he kept it in his pocket until he gave it to Isabella Brown the following morning. Isabella Brown of Morpeth said she took the packet from John Mitchison. He told her it had been left by the doctor at the public house. She said she gave the packet to Robert's wife the same morning. She said it was not unusual for medication to be sent from the public house. Mrs. Joicey said she was the widow of Robert. She said they had come to Morpeth in May of 1845 and had moved to Cockle Park. She said both she and her husband had been ill during the summer and had been attended to by Dr. Headley. He often left medication for them to collect at the local public house. She said her husband had last collected some in the middle of November. She said she remembered Isabella Brown giving her a packet at the end of November. She thought nothing of it, thinking Dr. Headley had left it as a present for her husband. Now, I have to admit that I found that quite odd, as how many people would say a doctor had left them medication as a present. She said she told Robert about it and he went to the public house and bought some gin to take the medicine with. She said almost as soon as he took the powder he became ill. He was being sick and had taken to his bed, and she said he died on December the 8th. Although she did give evidence, she did not discuss why a doctor had not been sent for sooner, and did not explain why she had burnt the remaining medicine. And she ended her statement by saying that she had not heard her son confess to what he had done to Mr. Whelans. Hannah Brown of Morpeth said she had been in the Joicey home when Robert was ill. She said she had visited every day during his illness and watched him get worse each day. She said she noticed he was very thirsty and his eyes seemed to stare out and he seemed to be in a great deal of pain. She stated that in the October of the same year, Ralph had come to her home and spoken to her husband. He had told him he wished his father would die and that he would not shed a tear for him. She stated that Ralph and his father did not live on good terms. Edward Brown of Morpeth said he had often spoken with Ralph Joicey. He frequently complained about arguments he had had with his father. He said they did not get on well at all. William Dickinson said he also worked at the farm in Cockle Park. He said he had seen Robert just before he died. He was very ill. He had gone to his home at the request of Mr. Whelans, who had told him how ill the man was. He said it was after this that the doctor was sent for, but by then it was too late. Dr. Headley said he had attended to the family in the past, and on the night of the 7th of December, he said he was called to the home of Robert Joicey. He said he told the family that he had not left any medication for Robert at the pub. He said Robert complained of pain and heat in his heart. He said Robert was very weak and he did not think he would survive. He died the following day. George Pringle stated that he worked for the chemist Mr. Crichton. He recalled selling some arsenic to a young man in November. He said he could not swear that the prisoner was the same man. However, he said he had been shown the packet of poison that had been found, and the writing on it was his. He said he had written poison on the packaging, as he always did before giving it to the person who bought it. Mr. Embleton of Morpeth said he had been in the chemist shop when Ralph had bought the arsenic. He clearly remembered seeing him and had spoken to him. He said Ralph had told him the arsenic was to kill rats with. It was now that a post-mortem was mentioned, and this had been carried out by Dr. Horden. He stated that he was certain the cause of death had been poisoning, saying that the arsenic produced could have produced the signs he saw in the body of Robert Joicey. Mr. Crichton of Morpeth said he had been sent a small amount of the stomach contents of Robert Joicey. He had examined these and could not completely confirm that they contained arsenic. Dr. Glover of Morpeth said he was an expert in chemistry, and having heard the evidence, he agreed that arsenic was the poison used on Robert Joicey. Dr. Potter of Morpeth also agreed with Dr. Glover. The defence then spoke to the jury. He stated that there was no evidence of a motive in this case. He said it was true that father and son did not get on well, but the majority of disagreements in the home had been between husband and wife. He said the son could easily have left home had he wanted to, so why would he stay with a man who abused him? He also questioned the confession, saying this was not clear proof of guilt. He added that he did not feel it had been fully proven that Robert died of arsenic poisoning, and even if this was the case, had it truly been proven that Ralph had been the person who gave this poison to his father. He called on the jury to give Ralph the benefit of the doubt and to find him not guilty of wilful murder. I did not find any evidence of the prosecution summing up, and the judge simply stated that the jury must either find the prisoner guilty of wilful murder or not guilty of any crime. The jury, who retired for an hour, returned a verdict of guilty of wilful murder against Ralph Joicey, but with a recommendation to mercy. The judge, now wearing the black cap, spoke to Ralph, stating that he had been found guilty of a terrible crime, and the punishment would be one to fit such crime. He then sentenced Ralph to death by hanging. Ralph, it was said, did not show any signs of emotion and was immediately removed from the dock and returned to prison. Although the jury recommended mercy, it seems no effort was made to commute the sentence to one of penal servitude for life. This was sometimes the case when the magistrates and the public felt the punishment was a just one. During his time in prison, it was said that Ralph spent some time in a state of depression before, it seems, finally accepting his fate. He was attended to on a regular basis by the Reverend Finch. No members of his family visited him. However, this was said to be at the request of Ralph himself, as he did not wish to cause them further distress. William, Ralph's brother, did, however, write him a letter stating that should he change his mind and wish to see them, they would do as he wished. However, it seems that it wasn't just Ralph who did not want them to visit. They themselves did not seem to want to see him, as William stated in his letter that they did not wish to make their grief worse. Ralph did reply to the letter, thanking them for their kindness and bidding them farewell. On the night before the execution, it was said that Ralph slept well, going to bed just after midnight and not waking until 5 a.m. He was then attended to again by the Reverend Finch, and he had his breakfast as normal. The executioner in this case was a man by the name of Mr. Murdoch of Glasgow, and he is not a man who I know very much about. However, he arrived at the prison and carried out the pinioning of Ralph Joicey in the usual manner, and Ralph shook hands with all around him before heading towards the gallows. Once on the drop, it was stated that Ralph held a Bible in his hands, and although he did not speak, his lips moved as if he was deep in prayer. The rope was adjusted and the cap was placed over Ralph's head, and, which is somewhat different to later executions, a short time of prayer was then held. And after this, the signal was given and the bolt was removed and Ralph fell. It was said that death was almost instant. And unlike later executions, this had been held in public and a huge crowd had gathered despite the somewhat terrible weather. From early in the morning they had arrived, all jostling with each other to get a better view of the scaffold. However, it was said that when the execution took place, the crowd behaved in a much different manner. Some wept, and others turned away, unable to look at the man before them. After the usual time of 1 hour, Ralph's body was removed and placed into a plain coffin, and he was later buried within the prison walls. Now, this was not always the case at the time, as a previous execution in 1822 had seen those executed removed to be buried in their own hometowns. I did not find any details of Rob's family after this date, but they would no doubt have had to move from Cockle Park, as this home, I believe, came with the job the father and son had done, and it is most likely that mother and daughter would have moved to live with other family members. This was a very sad case. It seems clear that Robert was a man who was not liked by his family. His wife and daughter did not seem to care that he was seriously ill and made no effort to find any help for him during his illness. His son Ralph also did not seem to care for him and had been heard to say he wished his father dead. However, we have no details of what Robert had done to make his family dislike him so much. No mention is made of him drinking or abusing his wife and children, only the fact that he felt they ate too much and that they argued a lot, and this, to me, seems like little to nothing. However, as is often the case, it feels like there is a lot more to this story than meets the eye. Perhaps Robert did drink and abuse his family, or it is also possible that it was his wife who drank and resented her husband for not allowing her more money. I guess the truth is we will never know for sure what led to the hatred of the family for Robert Joicey, a hatred that was so bad that it led Ralph to buy arsenic to poison his own father. Did the wife and daughter know about the poison? Well, although Ralph said they did not, I think that they did. They were not worried about getting medical help, and Robert's wife burnt the remaining medicine. Why would you do that if you did not know it was the cause of his illness? I think it was quite possible that Ralph took the full blame to protect his mother and sister. Were the jury correct to find Ralph guilty of willful murder? Well, I think they simply went on the evidence of his confession, both verbally and written. I think they believed that he did not like his father and wished him dead. He may well have regretted his actions later, but he deliberately bought the arsenic and sent it to his father, pretending it had come from the doctor. So I think they came to the only verdict they could. And the judge, when faced with a guilty of willful murder verdict, had no option other than to sentence Ralph to death. It's not truly clear why no effort was made to commute the sentence. However, it is possible that I did miss this in my research, or that it simply wasn't seen as a worthy cause. But in the end, it seems the death sentence was the only option. But what do you think? Do you think that, again, there was more to this story than meets the eye? Do you think Robert was someone who abused his family and in the end they had all had enough and decided to do something about it? Or do you think it was possible that it truly was only Ralph who made the choice to poison his father for reasons unknown? Do you think the jury were correct to find him guilty, or do you think they should have, as the defence asked, given him the benefit of the doubt? And do you think it was correct that he was hanged for the murder of his father, or should his sentence have been commuted to one of penal servitude for life? Do please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I do hope that you have found this sad and tragic story interesting, and it has been a little longer than some of my recent stories, so I do hope you did stick with me until the end. And I also just want to say that my phone went off in the middle of that, and the answer phone came on. I do turn it off so that it doesn't ring, but the answer phone still came on, so I hope that you couldn't hear the answer phone in the background. Don't really know whether you could. Did put me off a little bit, but I hope that I got through it without too much of a problem. Anyway, I do thank you all very much for watching, and I do look forward to seeing you all again next week.